the TV, radio of the 90s. We are all looking for one thing, and that is stillness, and stillness is God. News has become entertainment. As far as I'm concerned, sexuality is about who you fall in love with. It's not about who you can get it out for.
The 1990s are the end of a century, a decade where the struggle between individuality and conformity is the defining dynamic of pop culture. In the next half hour, you'll see sports grow from a game into a new mode of self-expression, while millions of young people choose to follow their own vision of spirituality, and how the internet allows its users to be individuals with access to the largest group of all. These are the signs of our time, the 9 signs that define the 90s. Alternative is the buzzword of the 90s, sparking a pop culture explosion, but inspiration soon turns to commodification. Extreme athletes lead a new movement, out of the stadiums, into the streets.
It's the whole movement towards extreme sport came about simply because there's a bit of a backlash against traditional athletes. Skateboarding is a sport and it's a legitimate sport. It's not like kids with toys destroying property. It's a real sport.
Skateboarding and other more body-risking activities were once seen as hobbies of punk kids. But in the 90s, they become legitimate forms of sport, and the word extreme enters everyone's lexicon.
Anything that doesn't cater to the jock culture or the prom queen culture is good. They don't want to turn into a baseball player. They don't want to turn into a football player. They want to be kind of their own thing.
These are more like individualistic expressions. In 1992, MTV Sports takes the action to the mainstream. In 95, ESPN launches the Extreme Games, now tagged the X Games, as an alternative Olympics. Music festivals such as the Vans Warped Tour and the MTV Sports and Music Festival bring it even closer to the masses, and advertisers take note.
All these mainstream people want to get the X Games crowd because they know that it's the youth. They know it's the young people setting the trend.
Music and extreme sports aren't so distinct anymore. They're almost an extension of one another. Anytime you see extreme sports on TV, music is a soundtrack to that.
Music is a real energetic, almost athletic thing to do.
So for me, definitely, music is the anthem. In our relentless quest for the new, people ready for a different brand of athlete.
Alternative remedies creep onto the medicine shelves of America as herbs go from backwoods to bottles.
Taking echinacea, I do like flaxseed oil in the morning.
I've experienced a lot of herbal remedies such as ginkgo, bilboa, guarana, St. John's wort. Everyone's a bit like rock. One thing is his thing. Just that little ferment, that little pop.
What's fascinating is that you see remedies that used to be considered pure quackery become incredibly mainstream.
There is definitely a very valid place for them alongside traditional medicine.
There's no doubt that pharmaceuticals work, but at the same time, people are exploring.
There's a real distrust of the traditional medical establishment. People are more willing to try different forms of medicine.
And people can say, oh, I'm taking echinacea, or I'm taking some St. John's wort, and you can sound really hip.
Everything has its 15 minutes of fame. Kava, echinacea. They're speaking to problems that people haven't really found cures for yet. Along comes something that is aimed at making it better. Who wouldn't be interested in that?
Herbal ecstasy emerges on the early 90s rave scene as an inexpensive, legal, and seemingly safe way to heighten the party experience. Yet just like its illegal counterparts, Herbal X features dangerous side effects, primarily from the stimulant ephedrine, which is reportedly responsible for 15 deaths. In 1997, the FDA takes Herbal Ecstasy off the market.
The rise in popularity of herbal ecstasy was kind of a mixed blessing because it made people more aware of alternative herbs and stuff like that, but at the same time with a very negative connotation. Americans thought that there could be no significant ill effects. They see the word natural. They think, well, this has got to be completely benign. It can have side effects too. The main takeaway lesson of the last 10 years is that some of this stuff works, some of this stuff doesn't.
I personally have had no success with homeopathic medications. I get a kick out of spending more for my menstrual cramp remedies. That's something. And then I will still wind up taking that gulp with a Diet Coke and going to sleep mad at the world.
Individuality gets lost in a mall
Who am I? What am I? How do I express who I am? As points of reference, we use brands. So, in a weird way, a Starbucks can be a point of reference.
The culture's moving forward, and we like brands, we like detail, we like fashion, and in particular brands you pick represents, who you think you are in some degree.
What's happened is that the distinction between high and low culture has vanished, and we're all sort of cool and sort of middle class. Like it used to be that some people shopped at the Gap and some people drank Starbucks, and now everybody does. The prevalence of these chain stores became so popular during a decade when youth itself became so iconoclastic and doing their own thing. You can define yourself slightly differently. If you drink your latte with skim milk, that's now your personality. If you get the Gap, but you only get like a certain cut of coffee, maybe that defines you. Those Gap ads are fascinating. The ones where they've got the line dancers or the swing dancers, because you have a group of beautiful people dressed identically. I think the promise is it's you too can be a beautiful person in our non-unique clothes that anyone can get off the rack.
Everyone in khakis, everyone in vests, everyone in leather. Now they're selling conformity a lot more than individuality.
1999 America is the perfect place to do that.
Muy simpático el señor, pero la vez a su nadie nomás cargándole esas maletas.
No sé dónde se mete, pero todo el tiempo le tengo que surtir la ropa.
Lo único que pide es martini. Y para impresionar, lo pide agitado pero no revuelto.
Toda vez que veo más cama, entiendo que abrazo.
Es que tanto traiga. A ver quién dice el condón, porque la verdad, siempre vive rodeado de puros bombones. O serán bombas.
Pero lo peor no son estas mangas quemadas, sino estos cuellos llenos de lápiz de albarán.
Lo cierto es que nunca deja propinas. Y cuando lo hace, son solo monedas del tercer mundo.
Después vengo a Vicky. Empieza la recordación.
James Bond. James Bond. El especial de James Bond. A continuación, patrocinado por
Where are your condoms? Grab it on, girl.
explicit sex talk, pop culture can't compete with the U.S. government. From Monica Lewinsky to Anita Hill, politics produces stunningly vivid sexual accusations.
He got up, looked at the can, and asked, "Who has put pubic hair on my coat?"
The sexual exploits of the rich and famous make headlines, along with a parade of mainstream gender-bending celebrities.
The regular missionary sex between a man and a woman just was not enough to hold the interest of people this decade. It had to be Dennis Rodman cross-dressing. It had to be a presidential advisor sucking the toes of a prostitute. It had to be oral sex in the Oval Office.
Indeed, I did have a relationship with Miss Lewinsky that was not appropriate.
It completely blew up in the 90s when Bill Clinton had oral sex in the White House. And suddenly, oral sex became commonplace. What we've really seen in the 90s is the death of stigma. Bisexuality and homosexuality become cover stories. Hollywood actors stop shying away from playing gay characters. High-profile performers win kudos for coming out.
Katie came out first, and then Melissa came out. They were a huge inspiration to me.
The 90s was definitely a time of outing of the alternative lifestyle. It's a good thing insofar as it's a lot easier to be gay and out.
The entertainment industry has gotten a lot more forward about presenting alternative lifestyles. At the same point, a lot of those characters are written in sort of a silly, stereotypical way. It's certainly isn't true, I think, in entertainment industries across the board. It's still like taboo in hip-hop.
The sad consequence of the outing of sexuality is that we're now all sort of obsessed with it. We want to know who in Hollywood is gay. Nobody should have to come out just because the public wants to know.
It's not really great to have the whole world telling you what they think your sexuality is when you haven't worked out for yourself. That's part of the pressure of being a young celebrity in this day and age.
By decades end, the savage murder of gay college student Matthew Shepard serves as a chilling reminder that gays and lesbians are still confronted by fear and prejudice.
I think there are enough good people out there who are not gay, who can clearly see that something is going very, very wrong.
I think that we have a really false sense of openness. The public is still really, really wary.
In a time of senseless violence, people look to a higher power for divine inspiration as spirituality goes pop.
We're primed right now to start looking for new roots of spirituality because, especially today's youth, because they are exposed to so much. This decade sees traditional religion alive and kicking in American culture, while at the same time, there is a growing movement towards alternative spiritual paths.
I myself practice an alternative religion. I was raised in a Catholic home, and I never quite felt what I was hearing was true. I don't believe in any form of organized religion because I just think it's bullshit.
I would rather worship the earth and the God I believe in than like a church.
Celebrities also take that journey while spreading their mantras to the masses.
I think there are things that the West can gain from studying Buddhism.
I think a lot changed when Adam Young and the Beastie Boys began to do things Tibetan freedom concerts because it made young people aware of religious issues.
We will no longer be oppressed by the fascism of Christianity.
We look for celebrities to lead our lives. I mean, celebrities are our gods.
Buddhism and the Kabbalah and other religions that are philosophies that I've been studying, they're more adaptable to modern living.
We are all looking for one thing, and that is stillness, and stillness is God. It's that 90s characteristic of chaos and, an idea to your own individuality.
Street art steps up from subculture to pop culture, and body art moves from punk rock freak to mainstream chic.
In this age, like where everything is just so mollified and mass culturized, people are fighting to find ways to stand out, and they think that maybe piercing and tattooing is going to be it.
I was 14 when I got my tongue pierced. I was like the only kid in my neighborhood, so it kind of just separated me from the people that I really didn't want to be associated with.
It's not only the hard punk rockers who have tongue piercers, it's the 16-year-old kids in Chappaqua. That's not your piercing.
Yeah.
This piercing trend. It's just part of a much larger trend of the mainstreaming of subculture.
Piercing intentionally used to be subversive. Now, when everyone's got a nipple ring and a tongue ring, now you've got to get more extreme.
You can't do anything out there anymore because everybody else is already doing it. And it's really hard to be rebellious now.
Dos urbes, dos almas gemelas que no se conocen, dos chicas ya por el común juntaron su destino, dos ganadores, dos acompañantes, en la única fiesta de aire global, con ambiente despresurizado y con baños muy chicos. Roma, París, Londres y Nueva York. Plato que el viaje milenario a Luciana Fernández y se la da otra.
Pantalla delgada, profundidades ocultas. Una ventana al mundo tan real y vívida que usted nunca volverá a ver la televisión como hasta ahora. Down de Panasonic, la nueva definición de la perfección visual. Si buscan emociones, apunten este número. Durante estas fiestas, Bond estremecerá el mundo. El mundo no basta.
¿Te has fijado cómo siguen intentando de todo para que tomes sus refrescos? Hacen comerciales con gente con la que no tengo nada que ver. Usan personajes que ni existen. Y hasta me bajan la luna y las galaxias con tal de que les compren. Lo que yo veo es que gastan mucho en publicidad y lo único que yo quiero es un refresco que me quite la sed. Eso es lo que yo pienso. ¿Tú cómo la ves?
Gives us an ability to have a shared experience. Something that everybody's watching together has always been a powerful lure for people.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder.
In the Simpson trial, the death of John
John Benet Ramsey story. These cases take on a life of their own. The public has this almost insatiable quest and appetite for information, whether it's JFK Jr. or Clinton or the Gulf War. Ratings go up. They know that they have to deliver that 24-hour wall-to-wall coverage.
In the 90s, reality TV and tell-all talk shows blur the line between news and entertainment. While live courtroom coverage and 24-hour news outlets turn sensational stories into real-life miniseries.
One of the key things that happened this decade was the tabloidization of America.
News is becoming entertainment more than I think it ever had been in the past.
We want to know. We want to be titillated, and we want our news to be entertaining. And when our news is entertaining, we are more interested.
I had sexual relations with a Fisher at the Freeport Motel.
We're in this really cool middle ground where morality and standards and everything else is sort of flexible and relative and is all just for entertainment's sake.
The tragic death of Princess Di provides a week of programming, and the 90s culminate, ironically enough, with the public perusing every intimate detail of the lives of a couple steeped in privacy.
Tragedy has become sort of glorified, and all we want to see is beautiful people and horrible things. And I think as a result, we're getting jaded because all we want are tragedies that are enjoyable to watch.
We all watch the O.J. Simpson, wondering if he's going to blow his head off driving down the street with a car. You'd be hard-pressed to find anything more interesting.
By decade's end, we are captivated by the first interactive hostage crisis. As Columbine high school students, leaned on 24-hour news, use cell phones to do their own reporting.
I'm upstairs. I don't know if they know I'm up here. I'm glad they know.
Fortunately, nothing happened to them as a result of making those calls. The shooters could have been watching CNN and using that information to pinpoint the location of someone who was alive and shoot them. And I think that just speaks to how technologized we are.
To reach out and touch someone takes on new meaning as everyday life is transformed by the electronic bounty hunter.
The 90s is the decade of the homing device. With the advent of cellular phones and beepers, anyone can be tracked down like a bounty hunter's prey. Applications of high technology to human relationships change dating, business relations, and social interaction forever.
The prices of the services have come down so much that you can use it more and more and more, and it's just convenient. Cellular phones suddenly freed up everything. Just like, wait a second, I can talk to anybody, anywhere, anytime, all the time.
The cell phone and the pager somehow connote success, somehow connote meaning, somehow say that, yes, I'm important because there's somebody that needs to get in touch with me 24 hours a day.
Now it's like you're insulting somebody if you turn your cell phone off.
The fact that if we choose to be, we can be reachable 24 hours a day is really terrible because there's very little time when people have to be left alone with their own thoughts.
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. You can get it all online as we become the .com decade.
The single most important thing of the 90s is without a doubt, the internet.
The rise of the internet will be what the 90s are remembered for.
The internet is probably the perfect cultural marker for late 20th century youth culture.
Fast, short attention span,
Instant gratification.
You can go around the world on your computer in your bedroom.
In 1994, consumers gained point-and-click access to the World Wide Web. This provides an instant, endless supply of global information. And people turn from the telephone to the computer, and email becomes the fastest, most efficient means of communication.
Email can encourage a form of intimacy between people, whether it's in a business situation or a personal situation, that if they had met solely in physical terms, it might be a little more guarded, a little more reserved.
It's a good way for someone who hates talking on the phone to communicate with other people.
People aren't just logging on to check their email anymore. The internet also provides young entrepreneurs the opportunity to strike it rich without ever having to enter a boardroom.
On an economic level, I mean, it's sort of the 21st century California gold rush. I can't tell you how sick I was getting frustrated this year. Everybody.com coming overnight. Millionaire. Now when you talk about the web, you're talking about Microsoft, you're talking about Amazon. You're talking about a new way for people to shop rather than a new way for people to express themselves. It has changed the way we do business. It has changed the way movies are made. You can't look at an aspect of life that the internet has not affected.
It's a cool idea, but it needs to be regulated because the artists are getting ripped off by it, and that's uncool.
Even though I think a lot of people think that it's supportive and spreading the music, it's actually doing a lot of artists a disservice.
Like many technological advances before it, the internet has its dark side, spreading messages of hate to building bombs. Danger could be just a click away.
The other side of it is totally evil. Crimes have been committed because of the internet. Child pornography is huge on the internet. The internet is the tool. If you want to go up there unsupervised, and you're going to find your bomb information, or you're going to find pornography. If you put a tool in Charles Manson's hands, you're going to get a different result than if you put it in Mother Teresa's. The end of this century has been about breaking down barriers and breaking down walls between people. The internet as a medium of communication has probably advanced that cause more than anything else. The one thing that we can be sure of in the next millennium is there are going to be more ways to talk to each other. You're going to be always connected all the time. That's a huge change. It's not the kind of